A condo manager poisoned my dog without knowing her every move was being recorded. When Max fell convulsing in the yard, my world collapsed. Upon revealing the shocking footage, dark secrets came to light, transforming our community forever. A story of courage, justice, and the unconditional love for a four-legged friend. Prepare for an emotional journey that will touch your heart. Subscribe, leave a like, and comment where you're watching from. Let's talk about that moment when your world turns upside down in a matter of seconds. It happened to me on just another Tuesday. The sun was shining brightly outside, birds were singing like life was one big party, and I was screaming desperately for my Max as he convulsed on the lawn in the yard. Have you ever felt your body completely freeze while your mind screams at you to move? That's exactly what it was like. Max, my 6-year-old Labrador, my loyal companion, had foam coming from his mouth, his body stiff, his eyes pleading for help. And I knew in the depths of my soul that this wasn't natural. Someone had done this to him, to both of us really. I don't even know how I managed to pull my body out of the state of shock. I just remember picking up my almost 90-pound Max, a strength that only comes when you're desperate, and running to the car like the world was ending. And for me it was. "Ma'am, this is poisoning." And judging by his condition, it was something strong, intentional, the vet said with that face of someone who gives bad news every day. "You brought him in time. We'll perform a lavage and try to neutralize it, but I need you to understand that the next 24 hours are critical." Critical? He meant devastating. I sat in that waiting room for hours, remembering every moment with Max. From the day Robert, my late husband, brought him home as a puppy, saying I would need company when he was gone, as if he knew that cancer would take him in less than 2 years. Max was all I had left of the life I built for 4 decades, and now some monster had tried to take him from me. But wait, I'm not telling the story in the right order. You must be asking yourself, but where did all this wickedness come from? Why would someone poison an innocent dog? Good question. I asked myself the same thing while holding back tears in that vet clinic, until the answer came like a lightning bolt. The cameras. The cameras. 3 months earlier, when I moved into the Floral Gardens condominium complex after selling the house where I lived with Robert for 35 years, the first thing I did was install a camera system. Yes, I am that paranoid 67-year-old lady who doesn't trust anyone, and for good reason. My previous house was broken into twice, the second time I was inside. Do you know what it's like to wake up to a man in a ski mask rummaging through your drawers? Well, there you go. After that, cameras became my best friends. I placed 4 strategic cameras, one at the front door, another in the kitchen, a third in the hallway, and the last one, thank heavens, in the backyard, where Max used to play. They were small, discreet, almost invisible unless you knew where to look. While Max fought for his life at the clinic, I returned to the apartment with a single goal: review the footage. I sat in front of the computer, my hands trembling so much I could barely use the mouse. I rewound the day's footage hour by hour until, bingo. There she was, the condo manager, Susan Smith. That woman in her early 60s, always in high heels, impeccable clothes, and a smile as fake as a $3 bill. The same one who greeted me on the first day with a bouquet of flowers and the rehearsed speech about how Floral Gardens was a select environment for refined people. In the footage, Susan looked around with that theatrical discretion of someone doing something wrong and then threw a piece of meat into my yard. Max, my poor Max, appeared minutes later, happy as can be with the unexpected gift. I watched in horror as he devoured it, unaware that he was swallowing a one-way ticket to suffering. My blood boiled. I could feel every vein in my body pulsing. You know that feeling like you could explode at any moment? That's exactly what it was. But I took a deep breath. 1, 2, 3 times. I wouldn't confront her, not yet. First, Max needed to survive. Second, I needed to understand why. And third, and I would make sure she paid for every second of pain she caused my dog. Do you have any idea who might have done this? The vet asked when I returned to the clinic the next day. Max was alive, responding well to treatment, though still weak. I have no idea, doctor, I lied with the kindly smile of a harmless old lady. But I'll investigate. You can be sure of that. And that's exactly what I did in the following weeks. Max came home weak, but alive. I put his bed in the living room so I could watch him constantly, and while he recovered, I began my private investigation into the condo manager, Susan Smith. I discovered by chatting casually with neighbors that Susan had been in charge for 6 years. 6 years of an almost dictatorial regime in the condominium complex. Condo association meetings were rare, decisions were unilateral, and no one seemed to question her. Why? Simple. Fear. Mary from 302 told me, over coffee in my kitchen, that her car was mysteriously scratched after she questioned an abusive increase in the condo fees. Charles from 207 found his garden plants pulled up one day after arguing with Susan about noise in the pool area. And Mrs. Eleanor, an 85-year-old lady from Building B, had inexplicable cuts in her water supply whenever she was late with the condo payment, even if it was only by 2 days. Coincidences? I don't think so. Susan started as a normal condo manager, explained Joseph, the superintendent, during a moment when I caught him alone. He looked around before continuing, voice low, like someone afraid of being overheard. But after the real estate developer Global Properties showed interest in buying the land to build a mall, she changed. She started pressuring residents to sell. Some resisted. Most ended up giving in. Global Properties. That name sounded familiar. I got the folder with the documents for my apartment purchase, and there it was. A letter from Global Properties offering to buy my property even before I moved in. They offered 30% below market value, claiming structural problems in the building. I refused, obviously. The broker tried to insist, said I should reconsider, that it was a unique opportunity. I told him to take a hike. The pieces started falling into place. Susan was clearly receiving a commission from Global Properties for each apartment sold. And I, the stubborn new resident who refused to sell, was an obstacle. Max, my loyal companion, was just collateral damage in her real estate war. But why attack the dog and not the owner? Simple. Psychological pressure. She wanted to destabilize me emotionally, make me associate the condominium complex with bad memories, make me feel insecure. A perverse strategy, but intelligent. The kind of thing that would work with a lonely, widowed old lady, except I wasn't the kind of widowed old lady she imagined. At the first condo association meeting I attended, a month after Max was poisoned, Susan announced new rules for pets. For reasons of hygiene and safety, she said with that plastic smile, dogs over 30 pounds will no longer be allowed in the common areas of the condominium complex. Eyes turned to me. Max weighed almost 90 pounds. He was the only large dog in the condominium complex. And the ones who already live here, I asked with my best confused old lady voice. They will have a 30-day adaptation period, she replied, feigning generosity. After that, fines will be applied. The residents agreed like sheep being led to the slaughter. No one questioned it. No one except me. The bylaws I signed when I bought my apartment do not contain this restriction, I argued, leafing through the papers I had strategically brought with me. And as I understand it, any change to the bylaws must be approved by 70% of the residents in a specific meeting for this purpose. Susan swallowed hard. Her smile wavered for half a second before returning, now more forced. Mrs. Eleanor, the meeting is approving it now, she tried to circumvent. Without prior notice specifying the topic, without a formal vote recorded. In the minutes? Without the minimum quorum present? I asked, displaying the bylaws like someone showing a trump card. I don't think so. The silence that followed was delicious. Some residents looked away, embarrassed. Others watched me with a mixture of surprise and admiration. Susan, meanwhile, had that look of someone who just found a particularly annoying bug. Let's leave this discussion for the next meeting, she deflected. Moving on to the next item. I won the battle, but I knew the war had only just begun. In the following days, I noticed the superintendent constantly watching my window. The water in my apartment started coming out with a strange smell. I received fines for violations I never committed, such as leaving trash outside permitted hours and making noise after 10 p.m. The pressure was increasing, but I was also prepared. I installed more cameras. I started collecting water samples. I documented every unfair fine with counter-evidence. And most importantly, I started forming alliances. First with Mrs. Eleanor, who had suffered abuse for years, then with Charles from 207, who revealed finding taps on his landline after arguing with Susan. Mary from 302 joined us when she received an absurd charge for a supposed leak that damaged the apartment below. Coincidentally, days after she questioned the condo accounts, we formed a small resistance group. Discreet meetings in my apartment, always under the pretense of playing canasta or watching soap operas. At each meeting, more stories emerged, more evidence accumulated. Susan wasn't just a corrupt condo manager. She was the leader of a sophisticated scheme of manipulation and extortion. It was at one of these meetings that I met Frederick, a former condo board member who had been mysteriously removed the previous year. His story made my hair stand on end. Susan embezzled over $300,000 from the condominium complex's reserve fund, he revealed, showing documents he had secretly kept. When I questioned it, I was accused of trying to stage a coup. She forged my signature on documents, turned the residents against me. I had to move in with my daughter for a while. There was so much harassment. And why didn't you report it to the police? I asked, perplexed. I reported it. Twice, he sighed, defeated. Do you know who the police chief of our area is? Her husband's cousin. The reports magically disappeared. This explained the impunity. Susan had connections. She was protected. All the more reason for us to be extremely careful with our plan. Meanwhile, Max recovered completely and returned to being the cheerful dog he had always been. We walked around the condominium complex always together, I ostentatiously carrying pepper spray and a visible camera on my chest. To document the beauties of the condominium complex, I replied with an innocent smile when someone asked. 2 months passed. Our meetings continued. Our dossier grew. We had evidence of embezzlement, document forgery, harassment of residents. But we needed something definitive, something that not even a cousin police chief could ignore. And then, one Saturday morning, I received the call that would change everything. Mrs. Eleanor, it was Joseph, the superintendent, his voice trembling. I need to talk to you, not on the phone. Can I come over in 15 minutes? When Joseph arrived, he looked like he had aged 10 years since our last conversation. He rushed in, checked the windows, lowered his voice. She's going to try again, he said, his hands shaking. Susan, he's going to poison your dog again. She bought a stronger poison this time, the kind that leaves no trace. She told me to put it in his food, said if I didn't, she'd tell the police about my son. Joseph's son was on probation for a crime he didn't commit. It was his weak spot, and Susan knew it. When? I asked, surprisingly calm. Tonight. She knows. You go to Saturday evening mass at 7 p.m. She wants me to take advantage of that time. Perfect, simply perfect. I spent the rest of the day preparing everything. I called my allies, alerted Frederick with his local press contacts, and prepared the most elaborate trap a 67-year-old lady had ever set in the history of that condominium complex. At 6:45 p.m., I left the house dressed for mass, with Max inside the apartment. But instead of going to church, I got into Frederick's car, which was strategically parked outside the reach of the condominium complex cameras. We returned through a secondary entrance that few people knew about and hid in Mrs. Eleanor's apartment, with a privileged view of my door. At 7:10 p.m., Joseph appeared, visibly nervous. He used the master key he had as superintendent, entered my apartment and left 5 minutes later. My heart raced. Had he gone through with Susan's plan, despite our agreement? At 7:30 p.m., the unexpected happened. Susan appeared. She also used our key, which she definitely shouldn't have had, and entered my apartment. She stayed inside for almost 15 minutes. When she left, she was carrying a folder I recognized immediately, my personal documents, including deeds and bank statements. Did you record everything? I asked Frederick, who nodded, showing the professional camera. Charles, in another strategic spot, also confirmed he had filmed. And most importantly, all my internal cameras were working perfectly. When I returned to my apartment an hour later, Max was fine. Joseph had fulfilled his part of our agreement. He pretended to put the poison, but in reality, he only simulated it for the condominium complex security cameras. The poisoned food was safely stored as evidence. Checking the footage from my internal cameras, I had confirmation of everything. Joseph entering, pretending to contaminate the food. Susan entering afterwards, checking the food, probably to make sure the poison was there, and then rummaging through my documents, taking copies, clearly looking for some financial or legal vulnerability to pressure me. The most shocking thing, however, was what she said on the phone while she was in my apartment, unaware that every word was being recorded. "You can prepare the offer. The old lady with the dog won't last another month. Either she sells for whatever we offer, or we'll find a way to kick her out. And if that damn dog survives again, I have other ways to pressure her. I just found her documents. I know where to hit to hurt." The annual Condo Association meeting was scheduled for 2 weeks later. That was enough time for us to prepare our presentation. Frederick used his contacts to ensure the presence of a representative from the district attorney's office. Charles convinced a city council member friend to coincidentally attend to speak about senior citizens' rights. And I was ready for the confrontation of my life. The day arrived. The condominium complex party room was packed like never before. In addition to the usual residents, unfamiliar faces, journalists in disguise, authorities in plain clothes, mingled with the crowd. Susan seemed slightly uncomfortable with the unexpected audience, but maintained her usual plastic smile. "Before we begin the meeting, I would like to make a special announcement," she said, consulting her notes. "Global Properties has increased its offer for the Building A apartments. It's a unique opportunity that—" "Excuse me, Susan," I interrupted, standing up. "Before we talk about sales, I have an important presentation for everyone." Her look was a mixture of surprise and irritation. "Mrs. Eleanor, we have an agenda to follow, and I believe what I'm about to show is relevant to everyone's decision about whether or not to sell their properties," I insisted, already walking towards the projector that Frederick had strategically installed. A murmur spread through the room. Susan clearly didn't know how to react without looking authoritarian in front of the distinguished visitors. "Just 5 minutes," she conceded with a forced smile. 5 minutes was all I needed. The first images showed Susan throwing poisoned meat to Max. The next one's her invading my apartment. The audio of her phone conversation echoed through the room, crystal clear, undeniable. We presented documents showing embezzlement, recorded testimonies of harassed residents, evidence of forged minutes and records. The silence that followed was deafening. Susan tried to stand up, but her legs seemed to give out. Her face, previously flushed, was pale as paper. This is a setup. An absurd persecution by an old lady who clearly has mental problems," she finally managed to stammer. That's when Max, my faithful companion, entered the room, led by Joseph. The superintendent walked to the center, visibly nervous, but determined. "I confirm everything Mrs. Eleanor showed," he said, his voice trembling but firm. "I was forced to participate in several of these schemes under threat. The condo manager has a copy of the key to almost every apartment. She uses it to intimidate, to plant evidence, to pressure residents." Chaos erupted. Residents shouted questions. Others demanded Susan's immediate resignation. The representative from the district attorney's office discreetly approached, requesting copies of all the evidence. The city council member was already on the phone, likely calling police contacts who weren't anyone's husband's cousin. Susan, seeing herself cornered, attempted one last desperate move. She walked up to me, her face contorted with rage. "You don't know who you're messing with, old hag," she hissed, low enough for only me to hear. "I might have lost control here, but I have friends in places you can't even imagine. This won't stand." I smiled calmly, leaning in to whisper back. "This entire conversation is being recorded by 3 different devices, dear, and streamed live to a WhatsApp group that includes that police chief over there in the back. The new one transferred 2 weeks ago to our area. Oh, and he loved meeting Max during our morning walks. He has a Labrador just like him." Her face turned into a mask of horror. In that moment, she finally understood. She had completely underestimated the lonely widow from 204. The events that followed were almost cinematic. Susan was removed from the condo manager position that same night by unanimous vote. An external audit was hired to examine the condominium complex accounts for the past 5 years. Global Properties magically withdrew its interest in buying the land when it learned it would be facing lawsuits for attempted real estate fraud. Susan faced criminal charges for animal poisoning, trespassing, document theft, embezzlement, forgery, defamation, and an impressive list of other crimes that were discovered during the investigations. Her husband, who apparently knew nothing, or was very good at pretending, filed for divorce 2 weeks later. The cousin police chief was transferred to a small town in the countryside, where the biggest crime was chickens escaping into the neighbor's yard. Joseph, after testifying against Susan in exchange for immunity, managed to prove his son's innocence with the help of our new community legal support group. Charles was elected the new condo manager, with a platform based on transparency and respect. And as for me, well, I became a kind of local celebrity, the grandma detective, as the newspapers like to call me. Neighbors from other condominium complexes started coming to me for advice on how to identify and combat abusive condo managers. I even wrote a small manual, distributed free of charge at the neighborhood association. Max recovered completely and became the unofficial mascot of the condominium complex. Children who were previously forbidden to go near him now lined up to walk the hero dog on weekends. One evening, about 6 months after all this mess, I was sitting on the balcony with Max at my feet, enjoying the tranquility we had finally found. Frederick appeared, bringing a small package. A gift to celebrate half a year of freedom, he said, smiling. It was a photo frame with a picture from the day of the meeting. Me, Max, Joseph, Charles, Mrs. Eleanor, and the other allies, all posing like a winning team. On the frame, a simple inscription: "Never underestimate an old lady with a dog and cameras." I chuckled softly, stroking Max, who seemed to smile in his doggy way. You know, sometimes life puts us in situations where we have to choose, be a victim or be a protagonist. When I found Max convulsing in that yard, I could have simply moved, fled that toxic environment, but something inside me, perhaps the stubborn spirit that Robert always said I had, or perhaps just the unconditional love for my dog, refused to back down. And by facing that battle, I didn't just save myself and Max. I freed an entire community that was living under the yoke of fear. The cameras I installed for safety ended up being instruments of justice. The condo manager who thought she could intimidate a helpless old woman found out the hard way that looks can be deceiving. And I discovered that even at 67, I am still capable of fighting and winning battles that seem impossible. Max, lying at my feet, lifted his head as if reading my thoughts. His wise eyes seemed to say, "I always knew you were strong." I smiled, leaning down to scratch behind his ears, his favorite spot. "We're quite a team, aren't we, big guy?" I murmured. He wagged his tail in agreement. Downstairs, in the yard, now free from Susan's machinations, children played freely, neighbors chatted without fear, and life followed its natural course, as it should be. It's funny how an attempt to destroy me ended up making me stronger than I ever imagined I could be. And to think it all started with poisoned meat and a hidden camera. Ah, if Susan only knew. But then that was precisely her problem, wasn't it? She didn't know. She didn't know that behind the facade of a widowed old lady and her dog was a will of iron and an unshakable sense of justice. She didn't know that her every cruel move was being recorded, documented, compiled. And most importantly, she didn't know she had chosen the wrong victim. Because you see, there are 3 types of people you should never underestimate: mothers protecting their children, people who have nothing to lose, and widows with big dogs and hidden cameras. This is the lesson I leave for anyone who thinks about abusing power. Be careful. You never know who is watching. You never know who is recording. And you certainly never know when a gray-haired old lady and her faithful Labrador will be responsible for your downfall. Meanwhile, Max and I will continue living our quiet life in floral gardens, walking through the yard every morning, participating in condo association meetings, now much more pleasant, and occasionally, just in case, checking the footage from our cameras. Because once a detective, always a detective. Even if it's just a retiree with time on her hands and an unconditional love for her dog. And as for you who followed our story this far, well, the next time you meet an elderly lady with her dog, remember, there's always more in that purse than just mints and tissues. There might be an indomitable spirit, a sharp mind, and maybe, just maybe, a memory card full of evidence that can turn your world upside down. Now, if you'll excuse me, Max is indicating it's time for our afternoon walk. And as we've learned, we should never ignore the signs our faithful companions give us. After all, it was a dog and a stubborn old lady who brought down an empire of corruption. Isn't it fascinating how life surprises us? Who would have thought that at 67, I would become a kind of local heroine? If Robert could see this, oh, he'd probably be laughing in that teasing way of his, saying, "I always told you that stubbornness of yours would lead to something big." And it really did. Not just justice for Max and me, but for an entire condominium complex that breathed oppression without even realizing it. Sometimes it takes someone from the outside to see the invisible bars that trap people. So the next time someone tries to make you feel small, intimidate you, or threaten what you love, remember this story. Remember that cameras are cheap, justice eventually prevails, and that an old lady with a big dog can be more dangerous than any corrupt condo manager could ever imagine. Now, Max is really impatient. That's our cue to leave. After all, we have a reputation to uphold in Floral Gardens, the duo that fears nothing and no one. And so we continue, an old lady and her Labrador walking peacefully through a condominium complex we helped liberate. Life sometimes presents us with unexpected battles, but it's these battles that reveal what we're really made of. In my case, well, let's just say I'm made of steel, covered in grey hair and wrinkles, and with an excellent ability to position hidden cameras. Until the next conspiracy, dear ones. And remember, always check your dog's food. You never know when an ill-intentioned condo manager might be lurking,